So the palace and city administrators, together with the elders and the guardians of the king's sons, sent this message to Jehu. We are your servants and will do anything you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever you think is best. Jehu responded with a second letter. If you are on my side and are going to obey me, bring the heads of your master's sons to me at Jezreel by this time tomorrow. A messenger went to Jehu and said, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. So Jehu ordered, Pile them into 2 heaps at the entrance of the city gate, and leave them there until morning. This winds up turning essentially into a display. Then he uses that opportunity, Jehu does, to make a declaration to the people that it's like, alright, well, yeah, I killed the king, but you see all this? This was not directly my doing. This is the Lord's work. God said that he would bring vengeance upon Ahab's descendants. Here you go. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, we are looking at 2 Kings chapter 10. Last chapter, there was this guy, Jehu, who was anointed. Technically, he was anointed by some nameless prophet, who was instructed to do so by Elisha. But he was anointed to be the next king of Israel, and he was told that he's supposed to basically wipe out Ahab's descendants. Ahab was a former king of Israel who did not really follow God at all, barely even had a thought about the Lord until, he was, confronted with it directly. His wife, Jezebel, totally had a thing against prophets of the Lord and whatnot. So this is now God enacting the punishment that was basically told to Ahab for that and other things. But anyway, okay. That's kind of where we're picking things up with Jehu working on that task. So here we go. 2 Kings chapter 10. Ahab had 70 sons living in the city of Samaria. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the elders and officials of the city, and to the guardians of King Ahab's sons. He said, The king's sons are with you, and you have at your disposal chariots, horses, a fortified city, and weapons. As soon as you receive this letter, select the best qualified of your master's sons to be your king, and prepare to fight for Ahab's dynasty. But they were paralyzed with fear and said, We've seen that 2 kings couldn't stand against this man. What can we do? Okay. That almost makes it sound like they're expecting these sons of Ahab to get together and, form a combat unit against Jehu or something. I don't know. It gives me the impression they think they're going to be fighting Jehu. The way I was reading that at first almost had me thinking more of they were going to fight amongst each other to try and decide who would be the next king. Or at least that would be the ploy that Jehu attempted to use to get them to kill each other, and then he'd just come in and sweep away whoever's left. But we'll see how that shakes down. Okay. Note there at sea, as in some Greek manuscripts in Latin Vulgate, Hebrew reads of Jezreel instead of officials of the city. Jezreel was at least very close to Samaria, if I'm remembering right. Wasn't that, kind of the location of Naboth's vineyard and such? I think. I don't know. My memory is not 100% sure on all that. But I am quite certain that it was at least nearby. Maybe even a subdivision of Samaria. Who knows? Well, sure somebody knows. Anyway. So he sends these letters out to various people who are close to or even guarding. It says they're sons of Ahab. Whether they were direct sons or more so like, grandsons or something like that, could be either. I think it's more realistic to say grandsons or whatever, descendants, male descendants of Ahab, because he already had two of his direct sons that were kings of Israel right before all this. And for 70 of them, it seems more realistic to get down to at least the grandson generation of the family tree. So, yeah, Jehu sends these letters telling them basically to get these sons, as it's worded there, of Ahab. And, let's see here. It says, select the best qualified of your master's sons to be your king. Okay, so I just read that weird before. So, really, he was looking for them to try and, have somebody kind of champion the army that would then come up against Jehu himself. But it says they're paralyzed with fear because they know that the king of Israel, well, the most recent king of Israel and most recent king of Judah were both killed by Jehu. So they're like, if two kings aren't enough to confront this man, how are we going to do this with just one? And then we move on to verse 5. So the palace and city administrators, together with the elders and the guardians of the king's sons, sent this message to Jehu. We are your servants and will do anything you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever you think is best. Jehu responded with a second letter. If you are on my side and are going to obey me, bring the heads of your master's sons to me at Jezreel by this time tomorrow. Now the 70 sons of the king were being cared for by the leaders of Samaria, where they had been raised since childhood. When the letter arrived, the leaders killed all 70 of the king's sons. They placed their heads in baskets and presented them to Jehu at Jezreel. By the way, just a reminder, Jehu had been one of the commanders of Israel's army up to this point. So, basically, the guardians of Ahab's sons, since they don't think they're going to be able to pull off, I should say, a resistance, they go along with what Jehu asks of them, which is essentially to kill off all of Ahab's sons themselves. So then they do that. Okay, verse 8. A messenger went to Jehu and said, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. So Jehu ordered, Pile them into 2 heaps at the entrance of the city gate, and leave them there until morning. In the morning he went out and spoke to the crowd that had gathered around them. You are not to blame, he told them. I am the one who conspired against my master and killed him. But who killed all these? You can be sure that the message of the Lord that was spoken concerning Ahab's family will not fail. The Lord declared through his servant Elijah that this would happen. Then Jehu killed all who were left of Ahab's relatives living in Jezreel, and all his important officials, his personal friends, and his priests. So Ahab was left without a single survivor. So, yeah, this winds up turning essentially into a display for for a bunch of the people of Samaria to see. And then he uses that opportunity, Jehu does, to make a declaration to the people that it's like, all right, well, yeah, I killed the king, but you see all this? This was not directly my doing. This is the Lord's work. God said that he would bring vengeance upon Ahab's descendants. Here you go. And then he kills off anyone else who's left after that. That is a descendant of Ahab. Including... Actually, also, I should say, any of Ahab's important officials that were left, his friends, and chosen priests. So, like, literally any remnant of Ahab's dynasty gone. Okay. So, this was all at Jezreel, actually, now that I'm realizing, because it says living in Jezreel here. Okay. Then we go to verse 12. So, maybe that was just all of Ahab's descendants and close connections who were in Jezreel. Maybe there's still more in Samaria. I don't know. Anyway, on to verse 12 now. Then Jehu set out for Samaria. Along the way, while he was at Beth Eked of the shepherds, he met some relatives of King Ahaziah of Judah. "Who are you?" he asked them. And they replied, "We are relatives of King Ahaziah. We are going to visit the sons of King Ahab and the sons of the queen mother." "Take them alive," Jehu shouted to his men. And they captured all 42 of them and killed them at the well of Beth Eked. None of them escaped. That doesn't sound much like taking them alive, but I guess they were captured alive, taken to a specific place, and then killed. But because Ahaziah... trying to remember if Ahaziah was directly descended. At the very least, Ahaziah might have been the one that married one of Ahab's daughters. Although I think that was actually Jehoram, and this Ahaziah was Jehoram's son, if I'm remembering right. Point is, once they said who they were, Jehu's like, "Oh, these people are connected with Ahab, they gotta go." And then on to verse 15. When Jehu left there, he met Jehonadab, son of Rechab, who was coming to meet him. After they had greeted each other, Jehu said to him, "Are you as loyal to me as I am to you?" "Yes, I am," Jehonadab replied. "If you are," Jehu said, "then give me your hand." So Jehonadab put out his hand, and Jehu helped him into the chariot. Then Jehu said, "Now come with me, and see how devoted I am to the Lord." So Jehonadab rode along with him. When Jehu arrived in Samaria, he killed everyone who was left there from Ahab's family, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. So that was all just Jehu making good on what God had commanded regarding Ahab's descendants. That's really about all there is to it. I guess this guy, Jehonadab, was not one of Ahab's descendants, because it doesn't mention him getting killed. Might have helped in the efforts in Samaria, though. Okay. But then when you get to verse 18, there's more. Anyway. Then Jehu called a meeting of all the people of the city and said to them, "Ahab's worship of Baal was nothing compared to the way I will worship him. Therefore summon all the prophets and worshippers of Baal, and call together all his priests. See to it that every one of them comes, for I am going to offer a great sacrifice to Baal. Anyone who fails to come with me will be put to death." But Jehu's cunning plan was to destroy all the worshippers of Baal. Bleh. I'm talking too fast. My tongue is not agreeing with me. Anyway. So, yeah. This little more scheming. He acts like he's going to basically one-up Ahab in terms of worship of Baal, which you might also hear pronounced Baal, but in order for it to flow smoothly when I'm saying it, just Baal works better. Of course, he says while tripping over other words and their pronunciations. Anyway. But, so he's acting like he's gonna one-up Ahab in terms of worshipping Baal, when his actual plan is to kill off all the priests. Or it says all the worshippers of Baal. Alright, then we continue in verse 20. Then Jehu ordered, "Prepare a solemn assembly to worship Baal." So they did. He sent messengers throughout all Israel, summoning those who worshipped Baal. They all came. Not a single one remained behind. And they filled the temple of Baal from one end to the other. And Jehu instructed the keeper of the wardrobe, "Be sure that every worshipper of Baal wears one of these robes." So robes were given to them. That sounds like a strategy to allow him to easily identify them. So he can kill them off like he's planning to do. And not get them mixed up with the people who are, at the very least, not worshipping Baal. Probably on his side. That way, maybe they're less likely to kill each other. Alright. Verse 23. Then Jehu went into the temple of Baal with Jehonadab, son of Rechab. Jehu said to the worshippers of Baal, "Make sure no one who worships the Lord is here, only those who worship Baal." So they were all inside the temple to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 of his men outside the building and had warned them, "If you let anyone escape, you will pay for it with your own life." As soon as Jehu had finished sacrificing the burnt offering, he commanded his guards and officers, "Go in and kill all of them. Don't let a single one escape." So they killed them all with their swords, and the guards and officers dragged their bodies outside. Then Jehu's men went into the innermost fortress of the temple of Baal. They dragged out the sacred pillar used in the worship of Baal and burned it. They smashed the sacred pillar and wrecked the temple of Baal, converting it into a public toilet, as it remains to this day. I know there have been previous times where the Bible has described these other idols and things like that as equivalent to dung in God's eyes. So it makes it extra fitting, in my opinion, that this temple to a false god gets turned into a public toilet, as it describes here. Okay, so all these Baal worshippers have been killed. Because basically he got them all together in one place and then had his guards kill them off. Note there, and they left their bodies lying there, or it could be read, and they threw them out into the outermost court. So it would be, killed them all with their swords, and the guards and officers, or it could be, either their bodies were left lying there, or they were thrown outside. But if they, like, completely wrecked the temple, then it might have become outside, if you catch my drift. Because, like, inside, but then building gets destroyed, then inside becomes outside. Anyway. Then Jehu's men went to the innermost fortress. Hebrew says city instead of fortress. But usually fortresses were cities, often capital cities. And in fact, I think this was taking place in Samaria. That's the most recent city I remember being mentioned here. It says of the city up here, and it just mentioned getting to Samaria before that. So that's my best guess. Anyway, they dragged out the sacred pillar, as in Greek and Syriac versions. In Latin Vulgate, Hebrew reads sacred pillars, plural. Either way, that something used in worship of Baal got burned, if not multiple things. And yeah, so that whole place is just destroyed. Verse 28. In this way, Jehu destroyed every trace of Baal worship from Israel. He did not, however, destroy the gold calves at Bethel and Dan, with which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to sin. Nonetheless, the Lord said to Jehu, "You have done well in following my instructions to destroy the family of Ahab. Therefore, your descendants will be kings of Israel down to the 4th generation." But Jehu did not obey the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam had led Israel to commit. So, while things might arguably be better, they still don't have a king that's completely devoted to the Lord. Now, I don't know if he then started worshiping these golden calves or what, or something similar, but yeah. You'd think after doing all of that by the command of the Lord that he would, lead that way the rest of his life. But no, apparently not, because, people are flawed and fickle, and yeah, prone to changing their minds over the course of time. But let's continue on to verse 32. At about that time, the Lord began to cut down the size of Israel's territory. King Hazael conquered several sections of the country east of the Jordan River, including all of Gilead, Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh. He conquered the area from the town of Aroer by the Arnon Gorge to as far north as Gilead and Bashan. The rest of the events in Jehu's reign, everything he did and all his achievements, are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. When Jehu died, he was buried in Samaria. Then his son Jehoahaz became the next king. In all, Jehu reigned over Israel from Samaria for 28 years. So King Hazael was the king of Aram, I think. And it says he conquered several sections east of the Jordan River. So that would have been like the part that some of the tribes of Israel claimed and settled in before having crossed the Jordan River to conquer the major portion of what was the Promised Land. So really that's even kind of the territory that had been conquered under Moses' command. Before then, Joshua took over, led them across the Jordan River, and conquered most of the rest of the Promised Land to the west of the Jordan River. So they lose a bunch of that to the Arameans. And then once Jehu dies, his son takes over as king. Now God, it does say that the Lord said to Jehu, your descendants will be kings of Israel down to the 4th generation. Now, does he count as the first, or is Jehoahaz the first in this case? Not sure right now. We'll probably find out eventually. But that's all we get in 2 Kings chapter 10. Okay, so honestly, I feel like I keep getting a little bit disappointed almost with so many of these people who do these big things for God, but then, like, don't follow him throughout their lives. Like, they turn away from him eventually. I mean, look, I get we're all flawed and human, and these people were too, and yeah, like, in some cases it's bound to happen, but it seems like it happens more than it should in the Bible. I don't know if that's just me, but I digress. So, yeah. Ahab's descendants, done for. Thoroughly and completely. So, yeah. That's all we get for this one, pretty much. As always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description for links to social media pages and all sorts of good stuff like that. And leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have, or questions, or anything like that. So that'll do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video, but whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.